If everyone will please find their seats, I think we're going to get started in a few moments here. My name is Nathan Borger. I'm the Director of Operations here at Barnes of Rose Hill. Forgive me for having to do this from the crow's nest up here. We generally have someone on stage to introduce whoever's speaking, but we don't have that today, so bear with me. So welcome to Barnes of Rose Hill. We are a small nonprofit arts center. In addition to author talks like the one we're having today, we do concerts, we do workshops, we do art exhibits. You may have seen Melissa Foster's exhibit on the way in. So check out our website, barnesofrosehill.org. We've got something for everybody. So that brings us to today. Mr. Jason Queen is a local author. He is a Clarke County native. And today he will be talking about his first novel, My Life Was Mercy Creek. He does have a second novel coming out soon. I'm sure he will tell us all about that. So without further ado, please put your hands together for Mr. Jason Queen.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate everybody coming. I was thinking one or two would be here, so I'm very thankful. And the 15 people I brought with me makes us look very full, so that works out well. I want to welcome all of you guys. I want to start by thanking Barnes of Rose Hill for hosting us tonight. They have been great to work with and just fantastic. I thank you guys so much. I want to welcome everybody that's tuning in by live streaming. That's pretty cool. So if you're watching in that way, I want to thank you for giving us a little bit of your time tonight. I'll start by saying one of the things about writing books that enticed me was that I thought I would never have to speak in public again. So that has worked out nicely, as you see. I'm super nervous, so I think the best thing to do is admit that to you. I'm very nervous. If you have your phones ready to videotape me doing something stupid, you might be quite satisfied that you find that happens. And I'm not coming in with a set agenda. I'm just going to talk to you guys tonight. And then in a little bit of time, I'm going to open up and let you ask questions. You will not have to speak on the microphone. I'll get to where I can hear you, and then I'll repeat it. And if you didn't come with a question, can you make one up real quick between now and then, so that when I say, does anybody have any questions, we don't have that awkward crickets chirping time period. If you got a few questions, I'd love to have them and try to answer them for you. So again, my name is Jason Queen. I grew up in Clarke County. I moved here when I was 12, and I consider this my hometown. The book, My Life Was Mercy Creek, is based on this area, even though I don't call it Berryville or call it Clarke County. It's based in it. Anyone who lives here can recognize the landmarks, and you start recognizing the area very well. And it's my hometown, and the people in it are based on people I grew up seeing. My family, the family there is based on my family. And anyone who who's read the book? Can I ask that? So thank you, first of all. Some of you are starting it and things like that. Thank you so much. And if you're holding the book, you've read the book, you're planning to, man, that is my dream come true. All my life, since I was little, I dreamed of writing a book and dreamed of writing something someone would want to read. And I put that dream on hold, as many of us do. Life came along, and kids came along, and wonderful things happened. And then I realized decades had passed. And I just hit a time in my life where I thought, man, if I'm not going to do it now, I'm never going to do it. My wife was very encouraging. She kept saying, just do it. And I remember sitting in a parking lot at work at the time I was commuting to Harrisonburg, and I would sit out in my car during lunch. And I thought, man, I'm going to just start writing this thing. So I just started, and I wrote. And then the next day I wrote. The next day I wrote. And for several weeks I wrote. Sentences became paragraphs, and paragraphs became chapters. And none of that is in this book. But it was me starting to write. And I put this book aside, what was it, Misty, almost a year? Just sat it down. I was like, man, I just can't write this thing. I'm not good enough to write it. I just didn't feel like the words were coming. So I spent the next year writing short stories and trying to learn how to write and to communicate my thoughts better. and then I came back to it. Then I left it again and came back to it, and it's what you guys see in front of you now. So, what I want to do is, first of all, thank everyone that's taken the time to read it or is planning to. But I also want to encourage you, if you've got a dream or something that's kind of been, living in your heart, something funny happens when you don't fulfill that dream. It becomes something that nags at you, doesn't it? It's something that you look at it as almost bittersweet, and it kind of calls your name from time to time. And if you've got something, I just want to say, if there's something, a dream you've always wanted to fulfill, just start. Start trying to do one thing that will lead to a second thing and a third thing. You're never too old. You're never too young, for sure. And that's one of the things I wanted to encourage you guys tonight about, was that. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the writing process. Anyone ever wanted to be a writer? Anyone here ever wanted to? All right, and I have for a long time. And you want to know, one of the things I did early on is I read Steinbeck. Anybody ever read Grapes of Wrath? I'm making you raise your hands a lot. So let me tell you about Grapes of Wrath. Grapes of Wrath made me not want to be a writer because it was so good. He was so good. When I would read Steinbeck's words at the beginning, the way he described the dust storm coming in and things like that, I remember being, I think, 18 years old and reading it probably for the second time and wanting to be inspired again to be a writer, or trying to seek some kind of encouragement from it. I got the opposite, because I thought, man, I can never write like that. I can never do that. And I want, and it's going to sound funny, my goal, and I've told those close to me, my goal is that when you read my writing, you say to yourself, man, I can do that. I can write better than that. Because that is demystifying this process that you think somebody you wave this magic wand and you've got to be christened to be a writer. I'm going to tell you, I always thought it was like building a brick wall. Anybody, I won't make you raise your hands. If you've seen a brick mason build a wall, man, they make sure that first layer is perfect, right? Then they go to the second layer, perfect, and the third and the fourth, and they build this beautiful brick wall. That's what I thought writing would look like, and that's what I thought it had to look like. And do you know how many brick walls I started and didn't get past the second or third layer because I just couldn't get it perfect, and it stalled me? I want to tell you that writing is not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. Creating a story doesn't have to be like that. It looks more like building a stone wall out of jagged rocks and rounded rocks and all these different shapes, and you're finding the right place to put here and the right one here, and then you put it there and it doesn't look so good, so you move it over. That's what my writing process looked like. Just building a stone wall, finding what fits and moving it around. And then when you read it, you don't know that we move stuff around a lot as we're going through it and editing it and changing it. But I tell you that because I believe everyone has a story within them. And man, if you just start writing it and being willing to move those rocks around, you might be pleasantly surprised at what you could produce. So that's part of what I want to do tonight, is just encourage you to let that story in you get out. If I could find one person that would say, man, I read your writing and I thought, man, I could do that, that would make me so happy. And that's one of my goals. I'm going to point out a few things tonight. Chloe Tobin is here somewhere. Can you wait? Can you stand up, Chloe? Will you do that for us? Chloe is our cover artist. Can y'all give her a hand and really embarrass her? So, she did the cover art. She's done that on the first novel, the second one, which is coming up soon. You may sit now, Chloe. She did the art on that. She did the formatting of the book, the really heavy lifting part of it. She did. I'm very blessed. When you look at the cover art, when I first saw it, I got emotional. It was just such a great thing. And I gave her nothing except for do whatever you want, and these are 4 covers that I kind of like. Pretty close, Chloe? And she produced that. It's an apple tree from her front yard. And in living in Virginia, we see apple trees everywhere, right? And you never see one that almost looks like it's dying or that it's in that decaying state. And it goes with the theme of the book so well. And she has just been tremendous. She's a great graphic artist. And I'm going to give her a plug here that if you ever need any kind of graphic arts work, she is just great to work with, because if she can take the jumbled up thoughts in my mind and make something so beautiful, then she can do anything. So, Chloe, I want to thank you for helping, because whenever I dreamed about writing a book, I could never see the cover, and now I can. So I thank you for that. Also want to point out my partner in business here, the business part of things, is Jackson Tobin. Jackson's back there. And Jackson's the man I went to when after my wife encouraged me to keep writing and keep getting the book. I realized, man, here's the problem. Once I write it, I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to take it to agents and all these things. I'm too sensitive. I'll cry and whine and moan and drive my wife crazy. The first rejection letter I got, I'd probably bury my head under a pillow. So I went to Jackson and said, hey, there's this self-publishing thing. There's a way to do it independently. There's a way to do it through Amazon. I have no idea how to do it. I couldn't change the clock on my VCR when we had VCRs, and I have to get my kids to help me with computers. So I said, Jackson, I'm going to hand you a manuscript. You're going to help me with it, and I'd love for us to partner up and publish this thing together. And together we formed an imprint, a publishing, independent publishing company that we called Independent Literature Brewing Company. And we call ourselves the Book Brewers because of that process of brewing something, that it's not this magical thing that you put the work in and something cool comes out in the pot at the end. So that's our concept there. If you've ever had any questions about the publishing process of things, Jackson's going to be lurking in a corner somewhere throughout the process, and he would love to talk to you about that. So what should I do next? You want me to read you a little something from, they say that's one thing authors do. You want me to read something to you a little bit? All right. That's my family stage there. All right, I'm going to actually read you a chapter from the first novel. If you haven't read it, then it's not going to be a spoiler. I hope not too much. It's right smack dab in the middle of it. It was one of the hardest chapters to write, but it's my favorite chapter. And I'm going to read you some of it, and I apologize that don't have the greatest reading voice in the world. Then we'll take some questions, and then I'll talk to you about the next one coming up. Does that sound good? All right. You don't have to stare at me while I read. You can look down or look up or close your eyes or whatever you'd like to do. This is chapter 8 of My Life Was Mercy Creek, and the chapter is called Broken. It takes place in February 1934, fiction. 6 weeks into the new year of 1934, my little brother fell through the ice as we crossed Mercy Creek. By the time we realized what was happening, little Virgil had been pulled downstream by the fast-running water under the ice. A large rock stopped him and turned him sideways, pinning him and making him barely visible to us through the frozen water. I don't remember him falling in. I don't remember anyone shouting for help. I don't know how my dad even knew anything was wrong. Before it happened, our father was leading the way and had told us to walk along the bank of the creek as we were making our way to the river to check traps and nets. He told my older brother Joe to watch out for little Virgil while Daddy was stomping out a path for all of us to follow through the ice-crusted snow. I didn't even know anything had gone wrong until I heard what sounded like a gunshot go off, but it was the ice cracking. I saw my dad up ahead. He spun around. Joe said something, I think. Everything was in slow motion, or in my memory now it is. Over the years, it always has been. I think maybe it's my mind protecting me from reliving it. Daddy moved quickly along the bank and then jumped off of the hillside and onto the ice below. He yelled little Virgil's name, but it came out more like the sound an animal would make when fighting off a predator. He pummeled the ice, smashing at it with his palms and hammering it with his fists. Minutes passed like seconds, and seconds passed like hours. So I don't know how long this continued before Dad pushed himself backward and off the ice and into the water. He began to smash away large chunks of ice, starting back at the hole little Virgil made when he fell through. Little Virgil was almost 20 feet downstream and under ice that looked to be 3 or 4 inches thick in places. As Daddy stomped away at the ice, Joe threw down a big rock and then jumped down with another one in his hands, and together they pounded the rocks into the ice like sledgehammers. At some point, Dad dropped his rock and dove under the freezing water and swam under the ice. Joe stopped smashing with the rock and started trying to stomp large pieces free in an attempt to decrease the amount of ice between him and Daddy and little Virgil. The ice cracked like a rifle again, and I saw Daddy break up through the middle of it. Ice pieces erupted all around him as he busted through. The next thing I knew, my dad was on the creek bank with Virgil in his arms. He was running straight up the steep hill in the snow and pounding his way up. He was coughing loudly, but little Virgil was quiet. As Daddy weaved around trees and stumps, I saw branches smack him in the face and head, but they didn't slow him down. Once he went to his knees, but only for a second, then he was up again. He hurdled a down tree in the path and stumbled, but was up again and pushing through a giant drift at the top of the hill. Then he was gone, out of my sight and beyond my hearing. Jenny had stopped screaming. Joe was down on one knee, half leaning against a tree. His gloves and hat and coat were spread all over the creek bank. The snow around him was darkening. No one spoke as we climbed the hill and made our way home. Daddy and little Virgil weren't there. Mama came running out, and everyone was trying to say what happened while one of us was screaming. She yelled for Joe to saddle a horse and go get a doctor from town. Mama didn't even notice the blood all over the snow, dripping from Joe's arms as he brought the horse around. He didn't take time to saddle her. He put a bit and bridle on her and pulled her himself up and on. The jagged ice had sliced up one of his forearms and both hands. Blood was all over Joe's shirt and smeared along the side of the horse. Mama tried to stop him when she saw the blood, but he was already in the horse and had her running as fast as I'd ever seen her run. Mama told me to get a fire going under the water barrel. I wanted to grab my water buckets, but she yelled after me and told me to just pile snow over the barrel as I got the fire lit. She told Jenny to have every fire in the house at full burn and get the house as hot as she could get it. Jenny ran inside as Mama told us she was going to the neighbor's house to find Daddy and Virgil. And then I was there, in our yard, alone. I filled our wood cart with kindling from the side porch and dragged it through the snow into my boil barrel. I couldn't find my lighter, and then I remembered I had let little Virgil carry it. It was in his pocket right now, cold, emitting no light or heat. My hands were freezing as I fumbled to light the matches I carried in my coat pocket. I broke two of the match heads off while trying to light them, but managed to strike the third one, and soon the fire around the barrel flamed up quickly, and I fed it with bigger pieces of wood. Once the fire was going, I kept adding snow to the barrel until the water started screaming. I tried to warm my hands, but they kept shaking, and eventually I just shoved them into my cold pockets. While I was waiting for the water to boil, I went inside to help Jenny build the fire up. Our baby sister Charlene was up in the loft just looking down and saying nothing. Jenny was quiet as well, so I didn't say a word. Minutes passed. The crackle of burning wood in the fireplace and stove were the only sounds except for the padding of Blondie's feet as she paced around the inside perimeter of the house. She seemed to sense that something was wrong. Charlene dropped a book, and Jenny jumped and let out a small sound like a stifled yelp. The house felt small, and for the first time and only time in my life, the walls were like those of a cage, not a home. I walked outside, and the flames from all of the wood I had piled up had reached over the top of the barrel, and the water was starting to steam. One of the logs was making a whistling sound that soon became louder, like a wounded scream. I didn't need to add any more wood, but I didn't want to go back inside. I stood in one place. My eyes moved, my body did not. An hour passed. I went back inside at noon and asked the girls if they were okay. Jenny was crying in the back room. She nodded at me. Charlene was asleep up in the loft. I found my gloves and my scarf and put them on. It was getting colder outside, even though the sun was at its brightest. The fire was so hot that my water was boiling away. I added more snow by the bucketful. The steam engulfed me and made me stumble backwards and sit down hard in the snow. I moved over to a log that we used as a chopping block, and I made it my seat. After another hour passed, my heart met with my mind, and they came to the conclusion that my little brother was dead. I felt the heat of my tears as they ran down my face. I watched them freeze as they dampened the knees of my pants. As the sun began to set, the snow on the tops of the pine trees began to shine pink. I added more wood to the fire and more snow to the water barrels. The task seemed meaningless now, but they were given to me by my mom, and I couldn't stop. Darkness began to fall upon us as the hours passed. The front porch light suddenly cut on, and Jenny burst through the door and onto the porch. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the loud sounds made me wake up. Coming up our driveway was an old truck, and tied to the truck was a horse. The passenger was slumped over. I leaned forward and squinted to see if it was Daddy driving, but it wasn't. The driver was Mr. Earl, a man who helped Daddy with side work cutting down trees. As they got closer, we could see that the passenger was Joe. There was a third person in the back that I couldn't make out at first, but by the time they pulled up to the house, I could tell it was Melly, Mr. Earl's wife. She was carrying a knapsack, and it looked heavy. Joe was not awake. He was wrapped in several blankets because the glass windows had long ago been broken out of the old Dodge truck. As he was waking Joe up to lead him into the house, Mr. Earl kept asking me where my daddy was and if little Virgil was okay. I didn't answer. I just stared at him. I tried to answer, but I couldn't for some reason. Melly put an arm around me and guided me back inside. Jenny led them to Mama and Daddy's room, and they laid Joe down on their bed. Melly began to change bandages that were already dark red. Her knapsack was full of bandages and tape and things you would find in a medic's bag. It had been Melly who spotted Joe at the end of their driveway. He had fallen off the horse on his way to the docks. After they patched him up and gave him warm clothes, Earl and Melly brought Joe home to us. As Jenny was getting Joe to lie down, he fought his way back up and wanted to see little Virgil. Jenny told him no one had come back yet, and I watched his face accept the fact that if Daddy wasn't home by now with little Virgil, then any chance of this day ending with good news was fading like the light from the late winter sun. As Jenny closed the door to my parents' bedroom, I could hear Joe quietly crying. After another hour, Mr. Earl gathered us together and told us he was going out to try to track down either Mama or Daddy. The night was bitter cold and immeasurably dark. Even the moon had left us. So that was a tough chapter to write because I based that character on one of my sons, Caleb. Would you wave, Caleb? And when my wife read it, she says, no, he's not dead. I said, well, he is. She said, no, he's not. So if you keep reading, he is not dead. I listened to my wife, and thankfully I thought, well, I can't do that. And she said, well, you're the writer. You can do anything you want. So he survived. So that is I love that chapter because it was the first time I read something that I wrote, and I thought, man, I felt like I finally was able to convey something that was in my head and able to come out on paper. And I even though it's a very sad story or sad part of it, I loved it because that was that breakthrough that I was looking for, and I knew, man, I think I can actually do this, and that was a great turning point for me. Why don't we take a little spot here? Does anybody have any questions? I'm bringing that awkward part. Anybody got any questions at all? Yes, ma'am. That's my oldest sister, by the way.
I hope it's not a spoiler alert to anybody. I first, if I can say this without crying, I ordered the book because my brother wrote it. I read it and couldn't put it down because it was so good. It was the coolest thing to see it come from Amazon with my brother's name on it. I was just so stoked. But can you give us a little bit of background on how you got a book written in the 30s? Because, obviously you're not that old. Dad is, but you're not.
She stole your question.
Oh. I mean, where on earth did you pick up that, that era?
That is a wonderful question. And this nice man asked me the same question before, and I said, save that, because nobody's going to ask any questions. So, great minds. So I'll give you a couple quick answers to that. One is I grew up, as you know, watching the Waltons. Anybody watch the Waltons? You didn't know you'd have to raise your hand so much. Yeah, that's right. We were the Waltons in many ways. And watching that, it took place during that time period. I've always been drawn to that time period. My dad was born a few years after this in 1938. My mom was born in 1942, and they're here as well. And I love that time period for one reason, because I love the simplicity of it. That doesn't mean it was easy. I love the simplicity of it. We live in a world that I feel like has even left me behind. It's so busy. I am very bad about staying busy, and I'm sure I'd stay busy back then, but it's just seemed like a simple time. I loved it. And then I asked myself, would my generation survive the Great Depression? And I don't think so. I think we'd have a hard time doing that. This was just a great generation of Americans that survived this because they just went down to the base roots of survival, and some of them even thrived. So I was drawn to that time period because of the Waltons. I love that show, and if you've watched it and you read this book, you'll see similarities unashamedly because I was influenced by that and by a show called The Homecoming, which was from the Waltons. And I love World War II, and this is the build up to World War II, the Great Depression. Without the Great Depression, you do not have the greatest generation that wins the war and helps the rest of the world save the world from evil. I believe the Great Depression was a training ground for the greatest generation, and I think the Great Depression was a time period where we were allowed to strengthen ourselves and prepare ourselves for what was going to be the hardest thing we'd ever faced, and that's fighting the Nazi and Japanese oppression and the fascist oppression of Europe. Does that answer your question? And I'm drawn to those times, man. I've told my wife, man, I wish we could go back to simpler times, and but you know, it's that we're blessed where we are today as well, and I appreciate that. So it's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
Do you write your book with a purpose in mind? Is it to teach people a lesson, or is it just good storytelling?
That is a great question. So I think it's a lot of things. So it's all those things that you just said, and I think depending on the story, a different goal will raise up first. The first goal that I have now, I've learned, is to write a book that I would want to read. And that's a very selfish goal because without sticking to that, I was writing the way I would think other people would want me to write, or I was writing stories other people would want, and I was struggling. But when I stopped and wrote a story that I wanted to read, that made that process much easier because I know what I wanted, and I could hit that target. Within that, yes, it's very tempting to try to teach lessons, not from a standpoint of knowing it all, because the older I've gotten, I realize I don't know half of what I thought I did when I was 18 years old. And so I'm trying to teach lessons maybe as if I were talking to myself many years ago, and maybe writing to my kids. That's a big part of it. Reminders of what's important in this world. Especially in this series of books, reminding us what's important: family, love of your country, these values of raising up, your neighbors, your community. And I have gone way off track of your question, but that's what I start off writing a book that I would want to read, and then within it, lessons come forth. And I don't always know where I'm going. I started this book that I was going to have the family be in a bad place during the Depression, and the father was going to fish them out of trouble by catching fish. My dad probably could catch enough fish to get us out of trouble, but it kind of went in a different direction. So it was really based around that. And it's funny, when you write a book, some people say they know exactly where they're going. I did not. I just was going to put a family in a bad place and watch them get themselves out of it. And I realized that they leaned on neighbors a lot and family. Yes.
Why were you trying to kill off your kid?
Same question.
We all had that one.
So, I wrote that story because I felt like I wanted to take the father. See, you're going to get me emotional. I wanted to take the father to his knees. And that would do it. I wanted to take him to his knees because I wanted to watch them rise up. And man, I love a story when you see a family rise up. And we're surrounded by so many stories where people fall. And man, it almost feels like we enjoy it. But I enjoy seeing somebody stand up. And that's what the story wanted to be about. And I thought that was the only way I could do it. But because I wanted to go home every day to my wife and get a nice meal and enjoy her company, I found other ways to do it, which you'll see in the following chapters. So I drop every tragedy that the Ingalls family faced in those stories, everything I could think of from Bonanza, every I dumped it on that family instead of killing off their son. And it works out good because when I talk in a moment about the second book, little Virgil is a prominent character because he's now 16 and fully alive and a great character there. So that's what I thought. I thought I had to use that to drop the father to his knees, but I used other things. Is that a good answer? Good, because it's all I got. Anything else? Yes, my other sister.
This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but when did you decide you wanted to make a sequel, or when you wanted to continue the story? At what point?
All right, so this, I wish I could give you a more romantic answer. And Jackson, who is my partner with publishing, I did not plan on doing a sequel. As you can see, the last few pages, I'll tell you where everybody ends up. But everyone was so kind and nice to me and saying, oh, we're waiting for the sequel, that I couldn't tell them there is no sequel. I'm writing a book about a family in an RV or something like that. But so I was actually working on a sort of a sequel with my favorite character in the book, the uncle. But that has kind of been put to the side, and I did start a sequel because people asked for it. And then I asked myself, do I miss this family? I did. I want to see what they did a little bit later. I knew I'd come back to them, so I did not write it planning to write a sequel, but I just missed this setting, and it felt good to go back to it, and everybody asking for it gave me a good reason to do it. So that is the second book, and we'll talk about that in a second. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So is Yates going to be in the sequel?
He is in the sequel.
Okay.
He is very prominent in the sequel, and he will probably have his own little side. You know, I wrote him in, and I loved him so much. Even in the book, I have to take him out of the story for a while because I was making him my protagonist. And I was like, well, I got to send him out to Texas or something. So, I love that character very much. He's the larger than life kind of thing. So yes, he is definitely in there. And he's got a motorcycle. So, yes.
What did you do before you became a famous author?
Well, I'll answer that in about 40 years if I ever get to that point. You mean job-wise? I still do a full-time job, of course, because I am very blessed to have a good job. I work as a paralegal in a law firm that we represent injured workers. So if somebody gets hurt at work, we try to help them. So I work for a law firm that's all over the state, and I'm usually based now in Manassas, but because of COVID, one blessing that has come from that is I'm working from home almost every day, so I've been really blessed. And in the acknowledgments, I even point out my law firm and one of the partners because they have been very encouraging. They just kept saying very nice things like, if you leave us and try to become a full-time writer, we'll break both your legs and then maybe your hands. So no, I need a job. I love my job, and I do this. Man, Misty, when do I write? When everybody goes to sleep, when I write just in the middle of my family. They've been very good about that. And, so I write while still being a dad and a worker. Yes.
So how long did it take you to write each book?
Okay, that is a great question. So the full-time span of the first one was close to 3 years because of sitting it, not knowing what to do with it, coming back to it. So about a 3-year time period. The second one started in January, mid-January, I think, and it's Chloe's formatting it now, and it'll be ready in a couple weeks. It'll be on Amazon in a couple weeks. So yeah, because once I could figure out, and I became a little crazy on it, trying I keep bringing my wife into the forefront here, but in writing the second one, it wasn't like I was trying to write as fast as I could. it was just coming out so quick that I wasn't going to stop it. So, and there it was, and it ended before I knew it. I read it and I was like, wow, that's the end. I actually said, whoa, I just ended the book. And then I turned it over to Jackson edits it, and Chloe formats it. She does the cover. She's got a great cover for the second one. So wonderful. So that whole process from beginning to end has taken, what are we, I'll show you my math, 3.5 months? Yeah. So that was really cool. I should have taken a little longer because I probably drove Chloe and Jackson crazy, and my wife. I am very happy with the way it turned out, and I feel very good about the story. But I got to learn sometimes to slow down, and one of my worst habits is just blowing through life. So I probably would have enjoyed writing it more if I'd slowed down. But I read parts of it that I don't even remember writing. That's how wonderful, and the best parts are what I don't remember writing, which is a little disturbing. But that's the time periods, and I'm working on another one now already. So, things will just come as they come. We're not promised tomorrow. So if I got it in my mind, I've been trying to get it out. Yes, sir.
Would you consider a new challenge to write either a sequel or a new novel based on the tumultuous times in which we live today?
I have written some about modern times, and I will probably do that at some point, but I'm very discouraged about modern times, just to be very honest. And I think...
all the more reason to write about it.
Right. And so the answer is probably, I'll never say never, but I'll be honest, I'm going even further back into the past, and now I'm working on a Western. Because these are the things, I feel like I'm gaining encouragement for our modern times by looking to the past. So would I ever write about something in modern times? Absolutely would. And I've tried. I've written some short stories and things like that. And almost my first story was one set in modern times, but it ended up me rambling a lot, so it kind of went to the side. But I absolutely would. I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. But I do love these golden years of the past. They're just so romantic and so just so big and beautiful. So that's where I'm camping out right now. Yes, sir. That's my dad.
Being your father, do I get a free book?
Let me discuss that with my business partner, and we'll work out a pay-as-you-go plan for you.
That makes me think I should have talked to you about that before.
Yeah, you can wait for me out at the car. How are we on time? Are we good? Wow, I can ramble better than I thought I could. All right. Anything else? Caleb, my son.
How do you manage being a writer and a father?
Man, he tossed me a softball. Can you see that one? That's beautiful. I think following this dream I've had has made me a better father, because you can get so up in your head, with things that I always just, it's made me a better dad, I think, because it's allowed me to encourage my kids and everyone around me to do what you feel like you want to do, and don't wait 30 years like I did. So, and I always tried, and I definitely failed, but I always tried to not let this book be something my kids look at and think, oh, that was when my dad disappeared on us. And there are some great writers that say that. Like, I went in a room and I locked myself in and I saw my kids 6 months later. Man, that would be a nightmare come true for me. I couldn't do that, and I did not do that. If they walk up to me, even if I'm in the middle of a good sentence, I tried to just close it and talk to them, or show them the process. So to answer your wonderful question, I tried the best I could to balance it. I hope I did all right.
What's his rating on it? What's your dad rating?
Out of 10.
All right, I'll take that. We won't give him any more time because you're starting to worry me.
Wait till you get in the car together.
That's right. Wait till he needs to wait till we get in the car together. Anything else? You guys are awesome. All right. Well, let's very quickly. Let me introduce some things coming up to you, and then we'll take some time to talk to you a little bit one-on-one and sign some books. Sound good? So what's coming up next is there is a sequel. We've talked about that. It's called The World Comes to Mercy Creek. It's set in 1941. I chose that time period because that's about, 7-year jump forward. It starts on December 31st of 1940, New Year's Eve, and goes through almost all of 1941. For our history buffs here, what happens in December of 1941?
Number 7.
Yeah, right. So, and that's where the book the sequel ends. That's the spoiler, Pearl Harbor. And I wanted to see what a family did leading up to that, and I'm intrigued by those times. As I said, World War II buff, and I chose that year. And now I'm going to tell you, and some people have said, man, I hate that you did that, but the sequel is not told from Jeb's point of view. So you can throw tomatoes at me if you have any, but I switched to a third person because there was some story I wanted to tell, and I can tell you, looking back at it, I couldn't have told it from that first person. Maybe better writers than me could have, but I wanted to tell it more from the families. Point of view. I wanted to make it more like the world opened up, and you see more of the sisters' points of view and the father, and I was able to write more from an adult standpoint and mindset there. So and that brought up a lot of storylines. So it's 1941, which is a great year in the history of our country, and a strong year. Lots of innovations happening then, and it was a fun book to write. And I hope that you enjoy it. It'll be out in a couple weeks. We're at that process now where we're finalizing it, like I said. So that's the project that'll come up next, and it'll be available for sale on Amazon, and it'll be available maybe here and here, yes. And then in Berryville, there's a little store called Berryville Treasures, if you're familiar with it. They have been so good to us, and other bookstores have as well. But this is a little artisan shop. They reached out to me, and they've just been so good to me throughout this, and it'll be available there as well. So that's the next book that's coming out. And then a really cool thing that's happening from the publishing company, the little indie publishing company that we formed to distribute these books. We're also working on a compilation of short stories that'll be released in the summer, around Memorial Day probably, and somewhere like that.
I put Labor Day on the ad, I just thought.
I think you didn't. I think you fixed it. We'll talk later. It'll be out by Memorial Day, right?
Yes,
Ish.
that is right.
So it's going to be a collection of summer short stories by a lot of different writers. And our goal is to try to let people see their name in print, man. They bring a story to us. We help them. And we're going to have some first-time writers in there. And we're trying to set it up. You grab it as a summer book, and you open it up and read a story. And I might have a couple in there as well. So it's going to be fun. And our goal is to help other people that want to write. We want to help you fulfill that dream. And that's going to be our goal, is to walk you through the process. And you might look at Amazon and say, man, I don't have any idea in the world how to get my book somewhere distributes. I will say this, and you will hear Jackson and my wife say, amen, that you could not be more clueless about it than I was. So if I can do it, you definitely can. And if you know anybody that's wanting to publish something or wanting to write, please let them reach out to us, and we might even have a place for them. So the next book coming out after the sequel is a compilation of short stories. Then I've been working on a Western because I love Westerns. I grew up on Louis L'Amour. I watched my dad read them, and I just love Westerns, love the Lonesome Dove series and things like that. So I'm camped out there. And then there will be a third Mercy Creek that kind of wraps up that time period for the family, and that'll come out at some point, maybe end of the year, or beginning of next. So I'm thinking probably too far ahead, but man, I'm having the time of my life. So I'm just churning out the writing because I'm loving it. My thing I keep reminding myself though is I like crock pot dinners and not microwave dinners. So I want my stories to seem like they came out of a crock pot and not rushed through a microwave. And I've got people close to me that if they say you need to slow down, they tell me that, and then they hit me in the head with a 2x4 if I don't. So that is a joke in this modern world we live in. It's a disclaimer. I think that's about all I've got. I'm going to be corny here and just say thank you. I was scared to death nobody would come, so thank you very much for coming.
1940 book?
You want me to read a little bit from that, or did y'all get tired of my voice? All right. Thank you for that. A nice little segue. I was going to slink out without doing it, but I'm going to read you a little bit from the first chapter, so you're going to get a feel for the different writing there, and then you might hear a familiar name, and he did not die in the water. So no chickens were injured in the writing of this story.
Yeah, our hearts cannot take more chickens.
That's right.
So
I think where everyone will say that.
So anybody that read the first book, did you get mad about the chickens?
Yes.
All right, good. That worked out good.
I texted him, he goes, "Oh, good."
So here's the background I'll tell you real quick. My daughter and my wife, they work at Chick-fil-A. I was picking up my daughter late one night, and I had this character, and I wanted it to be very bad. And I was sitting in the parking lot of Chick-fil-A and looking at all these chicken signs, and I said to myself, he's going to eat that boy's chickens. So that's the way that came across. All right. I'm going to read you I probably won't read the whole chapter, but I'll give you a little bit of The World Comes to Mercy Creek. You get a preview, chapter 1. Whenever cars crossed the Mercy Creek Bridge, the tires of the car and the old boards of the bridge would join together to produce a loud, rhythmic thumping sound. Those not familiar with crossing the bridge would immediately pull to the side of the road and prepare to change whichever tire had gone flat. Upon realizing there was no flat tire to change, the driver would look back at the small covered bridge and turn their head to one side or other in a quizzical manner as they tried to figure out what had made that troubling thumping sound. Locals had long since grown used to the thumping and either paid it no mind or found some sort of solace in the constancy of it, not only of the rhythm but in its continuing existence. The newest generation of drivers remembered that sound as a child in the backseat of their family's vehicle. Others claimed to remember it when the rhythm joined the cadence of the hooves of horses pulling a wagon or cart. Younger locals approached the bridge with a different mindset and often at a higher rate of speed. The more reckless teenage drivers discovered that the faster they drove, the faster the thumping, and at some point the thumping would become chattering. Along with the chattering, another phenomenon would sometimes occur for the most skilled of the reckless teenagers. As a car emerged from the bridge, a plume of road dust and exhaust would swirl into one and follow the vehicle off of the bridge and into the open air, giving the brief impression of a cyclone chasing after the emerging automobile. One such skilled yet reckless teenager, and fully alive, was Virgil Morrissey Jr. He was known by his family as Little Virgil, but his friends all called him Virgie. Virgil Morrissey, who's 16 in this. I had to do the math, and it kind of blew me away. Virgil Morrissey was able to produce a sound when no one else had been able to. The combination of his light car, an Austin 7 he had salvaged from the Kaiser's estate, and a dangerously high rate of speed produced not a thumping and not a chattering, but a humming sound. And a rumor, which quickly became legend, was that Virgil Morrissey had once produced not just one, but 2 cyclones. So that's the beginning. In a couple weeks, I hope and I pray and I would love for you to get a copy of it and see what you think. But what we try to do in this was follow the family. And I'll kind of give you, not a spoiler, but the theme that I took was, in the first one, I wanted to follow what would happen to a family when they hit adversity and when hard times come. In the second one, we're going to look at what happens to a family when good times are all around you and good things are happening and money's flowing a little bit and, everything is good. Is everything in a family great and fixed by money? Any parents here willing to shake your head and just say no? And I think any couples or adults would say, money definitely doesn't fix everything, and sometimes it complicates stuff. So that's the theme I followed in the second one. That sometimes a successful, thriving time does not mean that there are no more problems. So that's what we'll follow in that one. All right. Any more questions? Anything? Man, you guys are awesome. I want to thank you very much. I think what we're going to do is just take a little bit of time where you guys can talk, maybe socially distance and meet some new people while you're here, and then we're going to get set up and sign some books. We're going to sign back there. All right, so I'll be back there in just a moment, and we'll take some time there, and I'll be able to speak to you a little bit one-on-one. And this is my family over here and very close friends, so if you want to meet them, you can do that as well, and then I'll meet you guys in the back. Does that sound good? Thank y'all very much for being here tonight, for anybody tuning in. Thank you. And I look forward to getting to know you better over the years, because hopefully you feel stuck with me, and I'll keep writing as long as you're reading. So thank you. And now I'll awkwardly make my way to the back and meet you back there.